If you're making the move to South Louisiana, you have a couple choices when it comes to whether you want to live in a subdivision or whether you want to go a little more further out in a rural area. So we're going to talk about the difference between the two, some of the pros and cons of each. So if you want to find out more, stick around because we're getting after it right now. Hey everybody, I'm Sean Ramos. Welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel. This is Living in Louisiana, where we talk about everything that you need to know when it comes to what it's like moving to and living in Louisiana. So if that sounds like something you want to learn more about, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell because I'm putting out new videos just like this one every single week. Just in case you didn't know, I am a licensed realtor in the state of Louisiana, and as much as I love making these videos for you guys, what I really love is to help you with your real estate needs. So that number that's popping up on your screen right now, that's the best way you can reach me, and I'm the guy that replies to every single call, text, or email that comes through. So whatever specific questions or needs that you have when it comes to making the move to Louisiana or living in Louisiana, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to help you guys in any way I can. All right, so let's get into it. If you're moving to South Louisiana, you have a couple different options that you can do. You can choose a neighborhood or a subdivision where you have everybody together, or you can get a little further out in a little more country setting, a little more rural. Just a little bit from my experience. So my first 3 houses that I bought were all in subdivisions, and I made that choice because, you know, when we bought our first house, my kids were babies at the time, and I wanted them to grow up around other kids and be able to go outside and play. And that's kind of how I grew up. I didn't grow up in a subdivision per se, but I grew up in a small town where we could just go. So every day I was hanging out with friends and we were just out running around playing, and it was a really good time. And that's how I grew up. It wasn't necessarily in a subdivision, but it was in a small town, so that me and my friends were able to just run around and play all day long. So we bought that first house in Kentucky, and I chose a subdivision because, like I said, I wanted my kids to be able to run out and play around with their friends. They were babies at the time, so they never really got that chance before we did come back home to Louisiana. And then once we got here, we again bought in a subdivision for the same reason. Now, this one worked out perfect. As the kids grew up, some of their friends that they went to school with were all right there together, so they had the opportunity to go outside and play and hang out with other kids. And then eventually, we needed to move up in house. Once the kids got through elementary school and they were going into junior high, middle school, we decided to upgrade our house to go bigger, and we moved to Watson because I really wanted the kids in Live Oak. Again, we bought a house in a subdivision so they would be around their friends that they went to school with, have the opportunity to go outside and play. So as the kids got older, when they got to be about 12 or 13 years old, I found that they didn't really go outside and play like I had in mind. And it kind of turned out that I'm a little more overprotective of a parent than I realized, so I kind of had a hard time just letting them go anyway. So we made the decision to sell that house, and I bought 2 acres that are a little more further out. You know, we're about 10-15 minutes away from kind of like the middle of town, so it's not too far out, but we're away far enough. And we got that land cleared and we built our dream house. So now I went from having a pretty decent sized lot in a subdivision that was 75 feet wide to now we're about 270 feet wide. But if you are looking for subdivision options, you've got tons of different choices to make. So you can go from a 1-street subdivision that may have 10 to 20 houses on it to huge neighborhoods that can have up to 1,000 lots in them. And there's one that comes to mind that's right down the street from me. It's so big that it actually is split up between 2 different school districts. You've got about half the neighborhood in Watson that has Live Oak schools, and then the other half is in Walker, and then you're in the Walker school district. So speaking of that, if being in a particular school district is important to you, make sure you reach out and we can jump on a Zoom call and kind of go over where you want to be. And you know, there are probably some maps available and things that I can show you, so we can kind of confine you know, the area that you need to be in a particular school district. So you can go with some of the bigger builders. Some you don't really get any choices of finishes or colors or anything like that. They build these spec houses and it just is what it is. You pick a floor plan you like that has the colors you like, and that's the one you buy. And then some will let you choose some colors and different finishes and things like that. And you can also go with a neighborhood that has custom builds so that you can make choices on everything throughout the process. And that's something that I do have the ability to filter out in the MLS when I'm doing a home search. So if you're just dead set on not having an HOA, we can filter those out so that you're not even seeing those properties. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of living in a subdivision. We'll start with the pros. So number one to me is what I was talking about before. I feel like if you have a family or if you have kids that you want to be able to go outside and be around other kids, then it's a great option. In my last subdivision, there were always kids out playing sports, riding their bikes, riding around in golf carts. So it's good to see kids just being outside and not staring at their phones all the time. Two is because the HOAs in the subdivisions can help keep your property values up. I think one of the main purposes of an HOA is to keep the appearance of the neighborhood up, because it only takes one neighbor who lets everything go to drag the values of all the properties around them down. Three, they're gonna have rules and regulations that are gonna help deter some of the nuisance activity that you might not want to be around in a neighborhood. Four, a lot of neighborhoods have different amenities like pools and playgrounds. There may be a clubhouse, there's usually some green space. They have lakes that you may have access to fish. And five, some neighborhoods actually have big events for the residents. Sometimes they'll bring a band in for concerts. Some neighborhoods do holiday activities and events, and they just find reasons to be able to bring all the neighbors together. Now let's talk about some of the cons. All right, so same rules and regulations that could be a pro. Depending on your perspective, they could also be a con. But there are specific rules on things you can't do. Like a lot of the neighborhoods don't let you park an RV or a boat or a trailer in your front yard. They usually don't want you to park in the street if you have the room in your driveway. And sometimes they don't want you to park in the driveway if you have room in your garage. They keep an eye on things like letting the grass get overgrown, weeds in your flower beds, and things like that. And you're typically gonna need to get approval from the HOA to do things like widen a driveway, put up a fence. And I know a lot of people in this area want a shop in their backyard, so there are neighborhoods that don't allow that. The second con is they can actually put a lien on your house. So the way the process goes, if you're breaking some of those rules or regulations, you'll get a letter first as a warning. And if you don't heed those warnings, then you'll get a fine. So if you don't pay those fines or if you don't pay your HOA dues, they can actually put a lien on your house. And I've had a situation come up multiple times where I sold a house for someone, and for whatever reason, they were behind on their HOA dues or had a lien on their house from fines in the past. And one thing I can tell you is the HOA is going to get paid eventually. When you sell your house, the title company is going to find those liens during their title search, and the HOA is going to get paid out of the proceeds of your sale. And the third con is they actually cost you money. So depending on the amenities or whatever things that the HOA provides, you're going to have dues to pay. Now, in a typical subdivision with single-family detached houses, you're typically going to get a bill at the end of the year, and you're going to pay it all in one lump. Sometimes if you're in a condo or a townhouse, there may be a monthly bill. The costs are going to range widely depending on what they're offering and just what the neighborhood provides. So, it can make a pretty big difference in your monthly payment, especially if you're in the condo or the townhouse. That's going to figure in your payment. Your lender's going to want to factor that in. So, it's something to look into before you actually buy the house. All right, so let's talk about buying in more of a rural area now. So the benefit here is if you don't want an HOA, you're not going to have the HOA, but you still may have restrictions on the land that you buy. Just my house, for example, there were restrictions on how big your house had to be. There was a minimum square footage, what type of house it could be. Originally, they said no barn dominiums on these lots, and eventually they changed that. They also said there are no mobile homes allowed on these lots, and there are no temporary living arrangements, so I couldn't live in a camper while I built my house. So just because there's no HOA and no rules in place like that doesn't mean there aren't some type of building restrictions. And another thing is, you can have a really big, nice mansion type of house right next to or across the street from a mobile home. So once you get out of the neighborhoods, then there's no conformity or rules to what you can put on your property. You just get a wide range of different types of housing. And that may not bother you, but I do find that a lot of people who are looking more out in the rural areas, that tends to be their biggest problem on finding a place. They don't like having a big expensive house right next to a lower cost manufactured home. And the third thing is, you have no control of what happens to your neighbors, or nobody can regulate what your neighbors do. So if your neighbor just happens to make their front yard look like a junkyard, there's not much you can do besides complain to the city or parish. Maybe something gets done, maybe it doesn't. But one thing is for sure, if you need to sell your house and you have that type of neighbor, your property values are going to plummet, and it may just make it just about impossible to sell. It's another really big thing that I find when people are looking out of the subdivisions is that they may love a particular house, but they just don't like what the neighbors that surround it look like. But as you can see, you have a lot of options. There's a lot for you to consider. I would say my final conclusion, I guess, is if you like that conformity, or that uniform look throughout a neighborhood, and you want somebody that's looking out for your property values and kind of have some rules in place to keep neighbors from doing things that you might not like, then maybe a subdivision with an HOA is the best option. But if that's not what you're looking for and you want to be away from people and you don't want people telling you what to do, then maybe the better option is to find a more rural setting with a little bit of land. But either way, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So that number that's popping up on your screen right now, that's the best way you can reach out to me. I want to be a resource for you for all things real estate related. So if there's any questions or needs that you have when it comes to making the move to Louisiana or living in Louisiana, don't hesitate to reach out. And it doesn't matter whether you're moving right now or if you're just thinking about moving in the future. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Give me a call, shoot me a text or an email, and let's set up a Zoom call and we can talk about it face to face. That's it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next video.